Welcome to the next installment of my video lecture series in economics. And in this particular video lecture, I'm going to be taking a look at a Cournot duopoly, but different from the previous videos I've posted. We're going to be looking at these two firms that have differentiated products. So they're going to have different inverse demand functions. So the problem reads, the firms in a duopoly produce differentiated products. The inverse demand function for firm 1 is P sub 1 equals 200 minus Q sub 1 minus 0.05 Q sub 2. The inverse demand function for firm 2 is P sub 2 equals 81 minus Q sub 2 minus 0.5 Q sub 1. Each firm has a marginal cost of $1 per unit. Solve for the Nash-Cournot equilibrium quantities and prices. So we're going to focus first on firm 1 and get the reaction function from firm 1. So we have price, we have the inverse demand function, so if we multiply that by Q sub 1, that will give us total revenue. So if we multiply that through, we get total revenue 1 is equal to 201 Q sub 1 minus Q sub 1 squared minus 0.5 Q sub 2 Q sub 1. For profit, we have to subtract off the cost from total revenue, and since marginal cost is equal to 1, total cost is going to be equal to Q sub 1. We can simplify that to the profit of firm 1. So profit sub 1 is equal to 200 Q sub 1 minus Q sub 1 squared minus 0.5 Q sub 2 Q sub 1. We take the first derivative of that, and that gives us 200 minus 2Q sub 1 minus 0.5 Q sub 2. We set that equal to 0 and solve for Q sub 1. So if we add 2Q sub 1 to both sides, we get 2Q sub 1 equals 200 minus 0.5 Q sub 2. Dividing by 2 gives us Q sub 1 equals 100 minus 0.25 Q sub 2, and that is the reaction function of firm 1. We do the same process for firm 2. That is our inverse demand function. We multiply the inverse demand function by Q sub 2. We multiply that through, so we get total revenue sub 2 is equal to 81 Q sub 2 minus Q sub 2 squared minus 0.5 Q sub 1 Q sub 2. To get profit, we subtract off total cost. Total cost is equal to Q sub 2 because marginal cost is equal to 1. So total cost will be marginal cost multiplied by Q sub 2. We simplify that and we get profit sub 2 is equal to 80 Q sub 2 minus Q sub 2 squared minus 0.5 Q sub 2 Q sub 1. We take the first derivative of that and we get 80 minus 2Q sub 2 minus 0.5 Q sub 1. We set that equal to 0 and solve for Q sub 2. We end up with 2Q sub 2 is equal to 80 minus 0.5 Q sub 1. And if we divide by 2, we get the reaction function of firm 2, which is Q sub 2 equals 40 minus 0.25 Q sub 1. So we have the respective reaction functions for both of these firms, and we can take the information, take the reaction function for firm 2 and place that into the reaction function of firm 1 and multiply that negative 0.25 through the reaction function of firm 2, which gives us Q1 is equal to 100 minus 10, and that should be plus. Let me fix that for you, or for myself. Save that, bring that back up again, and do that again. My apologies. Thought I caught all of my mistakes, but obviously I did not. So we have Q sub 1 is equal to 100 minus 10 plus 0.0625 Q sub 1. We simplify that and then subtract 0.0625 Q sub 1 from both sides. And then we divide by 0.9375 on both sides to give us Q sub 1 is equal to 96. So we can place that 96 into the reaction function of firm 2. We know what the output level of firm 1 is. We place that into the reaction function of firm 2, as we've done here. We multiply that negative 0.25 times 96, so we get 40 minus 24. So Q sub 2 is equal to 16. So we have the quantities for both firms. Now we can figure out the prices that each firm is going to get. So we put Q sub 1 and Q sub 2 into the inverse demand function for firm 1. We get that. We get 201 minus 96 minus 0.5 times 16. So we get 201 minus 96 minus 8. And that gives us a price of 97 for firm 1. And we do the same. We place the quantities for firm 1 and firm 2 into the inverse demand function for firm number 2. So we get 81 minus 16 minus 0.596. P sub 2 is equal to 81 minus 16 minus 48, which gives us 17. So the important part about this is that you end up with different inverse demand functions for the firms that are in this duopoly with the differentiated products. So you have to go through that entire process of finding the inverse demand function for each firm. You place the inverse demand function, the reaction function for each firm. And then once you have the reaction function for each firm, you could take the reaction of firm 2 and place it into the firm 1, which will give you the quantity for firm 1 that maximizes profits. And then you can place that quantity back into the quantity for firm 1 into the reaction function of firm 2 to get the quantity of firm 2. And then given the information about the quantities of each firm, you can place it into their respective inverse demand functions to find out what the price that each firm gets in this particular duopoly with differentiated products.